Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next session, where we're going to be talking about the strength that e-invoicing has to power our UK economy. And as you know, global e-invoicing mandates are rolling out. And at PPN, we wanted to do our bit to ensure that the UK isn't left behind. And so, together with Charles Bryant, who is an industry expert and the secretary of the Interoperability Forum, and Carmen Cicerello, who is a lead advisor of the European Commission, we created the UK e-invoicing Advocacy Lab. And I'm delighted to be joined today in this conversation by two other members of the group. That's Dan Foley, who is a Finance Shared Services Director of Kia, and Liz Barkley, who is the Small Business Commissioner. Thanks all for joining the conversation today. So Charles, I guess let's start with you. Perhaps you could share a little bit more about our UK e-invoicing advocacy lab and some of the reasons behind us creating it.
Well, thank you, Alan. Delighted to do that. And as you've said, this group came together over the few months ago. We felt that the time was ripe and getting riper, as it were, to push again on the e-invoicing policy button, as it were. This group is experts, practitioners, members of the supply side of the industry, service and solution providers, end customers, and many other people who have an interest in this topic. It's a group of people who are commercially neutral in the capacity that when they attend these meetings. It is not sponsored, and it's ready to engage with other stakeholders, such as government and other stakeholders, to really promote and push along the agenda. The UK has successful pockets of e-invoicing, and we have a very capable service and solution industry. But nevertheless, we need to follow global developments and make some strides, and we'll go into the reasons for that.
Absolutely. Thanks for clarifying and sharing all of that, Charles. Maybe coming to you next, Dan. I mean, we've entitled this session, strengthening and empowering the UK economy. Do you think that e-invoicing really does have the strength to do that?
Yeah, I do actually, and thanks again, Ellen. There, look, building on what Charles has said, other countries have actually done this and have actually made significant progress on this, both in Europe and worldwide. And it's actually allowed their economies to actually improve how they've operated and improve the tax take in some cases. I think secondly, the UK is committed to making tax digital, and e-invoicing is a great enabler to that. Thirdly, the more we automate in the UK at this moment, the easier it is to do end-to-end business. And this gives us a great opportunity. And finally, I think from a cash flow perspective, that throughout many industries, whereby basically invoicing and the payment of those invoices may be harder and more difficult to do, what e-invoicing does, it takes away all of that and it makes it visible, transparent, and easier to operate. And therefore, therein, we have a supply chain that's actually empowered, better paid, and better able to support the economy as it goes from strength to strength.
So it's delivering on all of those objectives, really, isn't it, around the cash management side, and as you said, visibility down into the supply chain as well, and enabling those points of connection along the way too. But if that is the case, and we've heard that many of there are other neighbouring countries in Europe, Italy, Spain, for example, they have those e-invoicing mandates. I mean, maybe from your perspective, Charles, and why do you think the UK has been so slow, or uptake is so slow here?
I don't think UK is particularly different from most countries. I shall come on in a minute to the role of government and proactive policy making. But this is a fairly hard thing to do. I don't want to put people off, but industries are very heterogeneous. There's a lot of built-in legacy systems, a lot of practices. But nevertheless, with the use of what exists, the tools and standards, you can make it happen. But we are behind the pace. I think the main reason, my belief, it's not much to do with the generality of the economy. I think it has to do with the fact we lack some form of initiative, policy dimension, commitment, incentives to make this work. And governments have been very active around the world in different ways. And I think we can learn from that, because we do have the tools and the capabilities, but this lack of proactivity across the economy is probably the main reason I put my finger on.
Proactivity is an interesting one, isn't it? And I think it's good to know that we can do something about it, though, isn't it? It's not just, we don't just have to accept how it is right now. There are things that we can do to change, and maybe, Carmen, you know, you've got that kind of perspective from a European, I guess, a European perspective, and you're there in the thick of it, seeing things happen. Not just, obviously, we're looking at it from a UK perspective, but perhaps you can see it from a slightly different perspective as well. What are your thoughts on why the UK may be perhaps a little bit behind other countries?
Thank you, Ellen. I tend to agree with Charles. The role of government is, of course, important, because from what I can see in the UK, there is a lower level of awareness compared to other countries, according to a survey carried out in 2024. And this, of course, has an impact on the adoption rate. There are challenges for UK businesses related to integration, actual integration of electronic invoicing with accounting software, ERP system, and this is where the industry can certainly play a role. And there are also some cost concerns in terms of the upfront cost, while the return on investment is quite strong. But of course, having the government taking the lead, meaning agreeing on a roadmap or just communicating their intentions on how to make it happen would help. Would help by obviously increasing awareness, by creating also the business case for the solution and service providers to invest. So it would trigger a virtuous cycle, I believe.
And I like the idea of that, a virtuous cycle whereby everybody could really see, you know, I guess what's in it for them to some extent. You know, you understand, you've got the government on your side, and you can see the reasons why you're doing it as well. But it's not just all about big business, is it? I mean, maybe Liz, from your perspective, do you think that e-invoicing has a part to play in the smaller business cash management? And what do you think from your perspective?
Well, Ellen, thank you very much indeed for asking me to be part of this, because I'm not an e-invoicing expert. However, I do know that my small businesses are really concerned about cash flow. And Dan mentioned the contribution that e-invoicing can make to cash flow management, getting the cash flow in, which is all important. But also, from my point of view, anything that is digital, technologically driven, that automates the system, can help small businesses to manage their cash flow quicker. It can help them to get paid quicker. And that's what we desperately need to see more of, because small businesses don't invest unless they have the certainty. And part of that certainty is when they're going to get paid. And I think that's where this will really make a difference. I think the good news is that government is fairly active on this point now. They really do get that this can help with exports, imports, for instance. They want to see growth. They see export, import, and increasing that as being part of that growth and increase in productivity. The small businesses that have stopped importing and exporting because it's all been a bit too difficult in recent years may be encouraged to start up again. But if they do want to be part of that scene, so to speak, they have to be able to import and export and invoice into the other countries that are using e-invoicing. And I think this is becoming quite high up the government's agenda now.
Yeah, and I guess it goes back to having that communication piece in place as well, doesn't it? So that the small businesses understand what their role is in this, and actually what e-invoicing can do for them as well, because of course, we're talking about powering the UK economy, and small business is the backbone of that economy.
It is absolutely the fabric of that economy, never mention the backbone. And I think that small businesses worry about costs. They worry about making investments in the wrong thing. They worry about interoperability, and Carmen mentioned that whole integration with accounting software, for instance. They worry about getting it wrong and it being a costly mistake. And so I think that even if we were to do nothing more than to give much better support and guidance to small businesses on what's the right track to take, that in itself is really fundamentally important to this.
But of course, anything like this involves elements of change. I mean, maybe Dan, what do you think? I mean, if you're a small business or a large business, and you are wanting to go down the route of e-invoicing, who do you think should be responsible for that change management piece within the organisation?
Look, I think all this sits at the top table, to be fair. If you delegate this down the line, there's a little chance of it acting effectively, efficiently. So I think this becomes an executive decision. You're making an investment in technology, but you're making an investment for the right reasons, for basically effectiveness, efficiency, greater data control, more visibility. Like, we've had the opportunity from our side to look at enhanced carbon reporting, which makes it easier to operate there. So I think it sits at the leadership there, and it becomes a significant change program. And in reality, looking to all the other people here, and particularly listening to Charles and Carmen, we have to become the change we want to be here. The change we want to be, we've got to support the government and the UK economy more in our supply chain. So this change process, there's so many great technological solutions out there. There's so many great experts to rely on. It's easy to do once there's a mindset that we want to do it. It has to be funded, obviously, but there's a massive benefit from it. And the benefits are, reduced time frame for processing invoices, reduced time frame for basically, in case of presenting invoices for payment, greater management of your cash flow throughout the organization, greater visibility of data, enhanced data quality, all of these through an implementation of there. But I go back, somebody has to step up and say, this is the right thing to do. We need to do it for the right reasons. We need to set out a plan and execute that plan, and recognize that, this is not new. Other organizations, other countries have done this successfully. We need to leverage this going forward. But it's a leadership challenge.
Ellen, can I just come in there and ask Dan, because Dan, I think that bigger companies who are customers of smaller suppliers and have a supply chain could do a lot to help those smaller businesses in their supply chain get to where they need to get to. So for me, I think the leadership is not just about internally, it's about thinking about the resilience and sustainability of your supply chain and how you help them to get there, rather than expecting them, the smaller businesses, to find a way to step up to the plate. There needs to be some partnership working.
No, you're right. And larger businesses have greater resources, Liz, to deal with these things. So in reality, they should set the tone going forward. And also industry bodies. I think industry bodies in certain industries can also set a tone and actually draw on, like, the great work that's done by experts in the industry, like Charles, like others who've been through this and actually can be relied on to give us the right way forward to that. So yeah, there is internal leadership, there is external leadership, there's industry body leadership as well. But it doesn't take away from the fact at the end of the day that all of these things empower many things. They keep, as you say, businesses moving, they keep cash floating through the economy, and they help doing the right thing to make tax digital throughout the United Kingdom as well.
And for me, I think they're listening to both of you. It's doing things, as you say, for the right reasons. And I guess, Charles, maybe we heard some of the reasons from Dan just then, but in all of your experience, I mean, what would you say to everybody listening? What would you say were the top 3 or advantages or benefits that organizations can gain from implementing e-invoicing?
Well, so far you've heard quite a few of these thoughts on benefits. Many words spring to mind when you talk about digitalization. We take it for granted already that things like ticketing and a whole rafts of activity with the government, tax reporting, online banking, all these things are digital. It's curious that this area of supply chain automation and invoicing are still rather slow to take off. And there's many reasons for that. But the benefits, efficiency, tangible savings, productivity, agility, SMEs, once they go through the pain threshold with the help of the larger organizations and people who do this for a living, they become more agile. Better data transparency has been mentioned. The tax benefit, I think, is one that needs to be looked at very carefully. Many countries have jumped into tax reporting using invoices. It's a perfectly good way to go, but you need to choose the right angle. And obviously, with making tax digital already in the UK, I would see this as more of a potential to evolve. So this is not just an administrative change. It creates a platform, a catalyst, a fulcrum around which so many things can happen.
And I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Rather than looking at it as a piece of technology to just have one outcome in mind, there are several different benefits, as you just said, that you can get out of it that can in fact help to just strengthen and power, once everything's connected, small and large businesses, power that UK economy further. Carmen, as we said at the beginning of the conversation, those e-invoicing mandates are being rolled out globally, particularly Spain and Italy. They've already mandated their e-invoicing. We've heard about some of the benefits in the conversation today. Have those benefits come to fruition in those countries? What have you seen?
Sure. So Italy and Spain are very different cases, in fact.
Yeah.
Italy has gradually introduced mandates, first in business to government transactions, secondly in business to business and business to consumer, and they have a very high adoption rates. Italy has been a front runner in invoicing globally, I would say. The situation is very different in Spain, but this will change because they are introducing business to business mandates in the coming years. But there is something important when we talk about government mandates, and it is the reason why they do it. The rationale for introducing invoicing, because that impacts the way invoicing is then implemented. Because if you look at Italy, the main reason for the government to introduce invoicing was related to the tax revenues. They wanted to increase tax revenues. They wanted to close the VAT gap, etc. And that reason impacts also the rollout, how invoicing is rolled out, or even at a technical level in a member state. If we look instead at Northern European countries, there the rationale, the reason for introducing mandates where mandates has been introduced is purely related to efficiencies, business efficiencies and competitiveness of the private sector. Okay, and the way it's implemented is different. And I'll give you an example. Denmark, they have introduced the Bookkeeping Act, and therefore they haven't mandated invoicing to supply to, let's say, businesses, but they require the bookkeeping system to issue, receive, and archive electronic invoices. So they are mandating, let's say, the enablers. So it's making sure that solutions are there for the businesses. So the message here is, it's not sufficient to introduce mandates if the government wants to introduce mandates. But what is really important is to agree on the strategic objectives. And so if it's about efficiencies for businesses, then make sure that principle, that objective is there also when you're drawing the roadmap. So how to implement it is extremely important, because it impacts also the return on investment for businesses. Okay, the technical specific, how you require businesses to do it. It's as important as deciding to actually do it.
Yes, and you know what? Sometimes we talk about e-invoicing mandates as if they're one holistic thing, and they're all the same. But as you've just pointed out, they're all very different across the globe, and the drivers for doing that, as you say, themselves are different. So maybe the how has to, as you say, relate very closely to the why. But with any major change, there are significant challenges, aren't they? And perhaps those challenges will relate back to the why and those drivers, Carmen. But if you're looking at it from an organizational perspective, what would you say that those challenges to overcome would be? Maybe Charles, if you could answer that first, please.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think it's easy, as we say, to get lost in the detail and feel that this thing's too difficult to do. I want to stress that we do have the tools, the assets, and the capabilities. I think the SME market is not always the easiest part to undertake. So you need to get some big companies making this a practice. So I would say targeting is a challenge. Public procurement is an opportunity to show the economy as a whole that if the public authorities and contracting entities within the public sector take this on, it mobilizes almost at an instance, because it's often more than 20% of all procurement. Many suppliers get involved in the supply chain and therefore adopt automated processes. That's just a thought. But the biggest challenge, as we've sort of hinted at, is orchestration, mobilization, having a clear policy dimension to this. And it's going to be a public-private partnership. This is the secret. The two have to come together and create a machinery for that. Those are my main challenges. Others may have others.
Well, anything that you would want to add to that, Dan, listening to Charles there?
Yeah, just two for me, basically. One, I think choosing the right partner. There is so many out there. It's choosing the right person, and that very much depends, folks, on your attitude to risk, how good you're implementing change, how good you're integrating systems together. And the second one for me, everyone, is just staying on the journey. This is the right thing to do. It's going to come down the line. It's important to do it. It's important to maximize the benefits from it all. Like where we are at the moment, we've 88% of our invoices going through, and I believe we've just started the next stage, try and get up to 95% of invoices go through our e-invoicing portals, because we believe this will make a significant change to how we operate.
Yeah, and have that visibility that you can only really get if you've got that kind of connectivity.
Correct.
Liz, would you have anything to add to that from a small business perspective?
Yes, just don't forget the small business. Charles mentioned SMEs, but for me, it's much more about disaggregating the SMEs, because the smaller the business, the micro business, the small business will find this more difficult if they aren't getting the right support and help. So I think it is about making sure that you know your suppliers in your supply chain, know where they're at, and look at the support that you can possibly give them and where other sources of support may come from. But don't leave the small businesses out of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose to some extent that comes back to what we were talking around change management as well. If you have that within your change management piece and part of the driver of why you're doing it and the outcomes that you're hoping to achieve, as Carmen was saying, you can keep the whole of that route and that supply chain, including those micro businesses, as part of that and not be forgotten, because, they're extremely important to the rest of your business, as we've all discovered on many of the stories that have been flagged up over the last decade or so. So what is it about now, Charles, that feels right? I mean, as you say, we've had automation in place for some time, and we've been talking about e-invoicing for some years. What would you say is different about now?
Well, as I hinted at before with our group, many people have felt for some time that it's a great shame that the UK seems to have let this drop as an issue. There's a little bit of politics here in the sense that when we were members of the EU, we were very much part of the EU-wide e-invoicing policy, which is a very high priority for the European Union. And when Brexit came, this rather got dropped. But now I would say events have overtaken us. And let's be clear, we have a new government interested in change and growth. It's not just Europe, it's Latin America, it's North America. Interestingly, the Federal Reserve Bank system of America has been pushing hard on the creation of an invoicing network, and has gone live, and they are really working with their companies at all levels. Asia Pacific has been mentioned. India, very large country, the most populous in the world, has adopted a very strong e-invoicing approach. Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and all of Latin America were early adopters. So there is global momentum. So that's the second reason that we've got a new government, we've got global momentum. And the other point to make is it took time to create these tools and standards, and they now exist. It's not like we're looking around for solutions. They do exist. And increasingly, people in this country actually know about these, because to the extent we're an international trading nation, many of our enterprises are already being touched by electronic invoices, whether it be on the continent or North America or in Asia Pacific. So this must be the moment to try and get that moving for us.
And that's certainly what we're trying to do with our Advocacy Lab. You know, we've got all of those different areas, as you just pointed out, in place. So let's see what we can do to help power the UK economy. And it's not just about cost savings, is it, Dan? I mean, I think we've had a conversation a while ago just talking about what Keir has been able to achieve as far as your ESG agenda. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about that as well, please.
Yeah, we've gone from basically, everybody's got to do a significant amount of enhanced reporting on the ESG side for many reasons, carbon being one of them, folks. But I go back to the brass tacks. I think data is one of the greatest strategic untapped assets in the organization. What e-invoicing has allowed us to do is actually find out a lot more and do our reporting. Every product we actually buy has a carbon detail with it. Through the reporting tool that sits on top of our e-invoicing portal, we now can extract the data, apply a carbon calculator to it, and we end up with the embodied carbon reporting with immediate effect. It would have taken days, spreadsheets, people's timeframes, individual views, a huge plethora of different elements to it all. But now we have, for those 88% of invoices that come through the door, we're able to calculate with immediate effect their embodied carbon element to it all. And that allows us to make so much easier to basically report it. So our time frame has moved away from processing data to analysing the output of it. So it's not about data anymore, it's about business information.
And that is so important to business growth, isn't it? Being able to obviously support your supply chain and pay your smaller suppliers on time, but also adding those levels of efficiency and analysis that enables the business development, as you say. And I wondered on that point, perhaps, it's been great listening to all of your points and insights so far in this conversation. And I just wondered on that point whether there was anything more that you guys wanted to add. If I maybe ask you first, Carmen, if you wanted to say anything more, as maybe just like a final comment to share with the PPN community.
Yes, I think what Dan just mentioned is what the future will look like. It's about using and reusing data that you have in the organization for multiple purposes. So we've seen invoice data is being reused, of course, for VAT purposes, but also for ESG reporting and for custom declarations, etc. So it's the reuse of data and is as the main driver to reduce the administrative burden, especially for businesses. That's also a very important objective that should be, always reminded. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Carmen. Liz, anything to add there?
Yes, Ellen, you know that I always want to add, I want my small businesses paid quicker. And I think the e-invoicing will go quite a long way to do that. But we also need to think about the culture, because not all big businesses will necessarily be in the game of supporting their small businesses working in partnership. And even if they do have e-invoicing in place, they may yet decide to offer their smaller suppliers long extended payment terms. So we still do need to move the dial on that. But I think that these kind of discussions, these kind of initiatives, the fact that other organizations are bringing in e-invoicing just pushes that whole thing up the agenda. And for me, it means that small businesses may get paid quicker. If they get paid quicker, they have the certainty to invest. That's where growth comes from.
Absolutely, yes, thank you. Charles, anything to add?
Yeah, just a little reminder to everybody who's listening that the invoice is an important linking pin in all economic exchanges and the sale of goods and services. And you look upwards from the invoice or back into the supply chain, and you get into things like logistics and the order and the contract. And then from the invoice, of course, you look towards the payment and the cash that comes in. And all of this is about accelerating the process, creating the enabler for better management. And I guess that's all I would say. The invoice is really important. It sounds a very boring thing, but it isn't. It's very much at the heart of business enterprise.
Thanks very much, Charles. And finally, Dan, if you've got anything to add.
I think revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is reality. And all of this really helps the cash flow in the United Kingdom. And look, we've got great opportunities to develop this. The technology is there. I just think we can go forward. And just for people listening to this, go and invest and investigate. Great opportunities.
Thanks very much, and thanks very much, everybody, for joining the conversation today. I mean, it's fantastic, and fantastic, really, to think about what we can do to help power the UK economy. And I think that we've talked about all the different ways that we can do that. For me, the things which stand out are the partnership, the communication, efficiency, and that reuse of data, Carmen. I think that's going to be increasingly important. So. Thanks very much, everybody, for joining the panel and the conversation, and to you all for listening. And as Dan was saying, do your investigations into e-invoicing yourselves. And we have put together a white paper. Keep an eye out for that. You'll find that on our PPN research area. So, as I say, keep an eye out for that. And I'll tell you a little bit more about some of the objectives that we're trying to achieve at our UK e-invoicing advocacy group. Thanks very much, all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.